This is the Scottish Club Rugby Podcast. The Scottish Club Rugby Podcast. With Stuart Cameron and Dale Clancy.
Hello and welcome to the final episode for this season of the Scottish Club Rugby Podcast. And in the programme this week, Dale Clancy and I will be looking back at the Scottish Premiership Play-off Final between Hawick and Currie, and also the Kelso and Earlston Sevens, which brings us right up to date after 8 rounds of the Kings of the Sevens tournament. But let's begin at Mansfield Park and the Premiership Play-off Final between Hawick and Currie. Currie led 16-10 at half-time, had a player red-carded for a spear tackle, but went on to win 26-24. So despite finishing third, Currie are crowned Scottish Premiership champions, and they were clearly the best team on the day, so deserved the win. And the bonus, of course, was they also won the Premiership title, the Bill McLaren Shield, and took the unbeaten home record of Hawick's dating back to October 2019. Let's hear from both sides after the match, an emotional Hawick captain Shawn Muir and a very happy DJ Innes from Currie.
Well, we had 2 weeks to prepare since we were last here. Unfortunately, that did not go very well for us, but we've put the effort in and we believed that we could do it today, and it's shown. I mean, it was tough because obviously the red card, which I'm sure you'll touch on, but no, I can't describe the feeling to finally get over the line.
Yeah, you mentioned it, the red card just before half time. You know, you were in the ascendancy for a lot of the first half, and then that, you know, some might say it's a debatable incident, but you must have felt like your world had just come crashing down.
It just seemed like the same old thing that keeps happening. We do so well, we get ahead, we've got not a comfortable lead, but we've got a good lead, and then we shoot ourselves in the foot. So thankfully it didn't prove to be costly, but it certainly would have been a lot easier with 15 on the pitch.
And but obviously you came out for the second half. It looked like you were man possessed. It didn't look like you were missing a man for a lot of that second half.
No, the chat inside at half time was, look, we just need to work even harder for each other. I think to get today was all about just working for everybody in that room and putting the effort in, and we did that today. So hugely, immensely proud of the boys.
Yeah, I was going to say about the effort. I mean, like I say, right from the get-go, but in the second half in particular, boys really, really putting their body on the line, yourself included.
I think I've actually wrote in my hand effort just to remind myself to always just 100%. It's the last game of the season, biggest game of the year, and yeah, just everybody had 100% effort today, and I can't fault anybody.
And the monkey is off the back. You know, the last 2 years a hard take. You know, you undoubtedly, probably, I would imagine, felt a bit of pressure coming into this today. But yeah, that monkey is off the back. Explain to us what it means.
Well, third time's the charm, isn't it? But you know, getting so close. I mean, the first year I was at Currie 2 years ago, we probably thought we'd probably underestimated Marr, to be honest with you. They played well on the day. Last year I thought we played really well and probably could have won it ourselves, but unfortunately Hawick beat us, and fair play to them because they probably deserved it over the course of the year. But today, I mean, it just sort of came together for a change, and it was fantastic.
Lost for words a wee bit emotional at the end. It was tough to dissect. It was, mate, if I'm honest, I think it's probably the worst we've played for a couple of seasons at the wrong time. It'll take a few days to go over that, but look, it's sport. It's not just all about how we win, it's how we lose as well. So look, we'll congratulate Currie. They were the better team. They've worked hard for that. Probably been unlucky in a couple of finals, so fair play to them. Wish them all the best and enjoy the celebrations.
And I'm guessing it'll be too early to put your finger on just what went wrong today potentially.
Aye, look, a lot of things. If I'm honest, we started slow again. Just about clawed it back. I thought we had it near the end, but probably just a step too far. It's been a long season, a demanding season off the back of a 10-11 month season last year. Look, I'm not going to make any excuses. It's like I say, it's how we lose, and Currie were the better team. That's the end of the day.
And do you think at all, Shawn, obviously Currie had the red card just before half time, might that even have been more of a hindrance than a help in some ways?
A little bit. Sometimes when a team goes a man down, it galvanises them, like you seen with us last year. It's probably a bit of karma for the luck we had last year, but look, we said all the right things at half time, and we thought we were in control at that point, but them scoring straight after half time was a pivotal point. It kind of gave them a little buffer, but like I say, I backed us the whole way. We got a bit panicky. Those things in that game, that's not us. Like I say, it's tough to look back on it, but just bitterly disappointed.
Well, you must still be immensely proud of this, this group of men for, everything that's been achieved in the last couple of seasons.
Massively. I love playing with that group. I love every single one of them. It's been an honour being in that group. What happens going forward, I don't know. I have to dissect a lot, but it's probably the last game for us as a group. There's a few boys moving on. I have to make a few decisions if I'm honest. I don't know, but look, it's too early to say. But I'm massively delighted to have led the boys, and the club means a lot to us, the jersey means a lot to us, and that group does. And like I say, I'm massively proud to be part of it.
Shawn Muir, before that DJ Innes. Now, we spoke at length last week about the pluses and the minuses of the playoffs, so we won't go back into that again. I think we both made our points and neither of us are going to budge from our positions, which is absolutely fine. But why do you think Nationals 1 to 4 don't have playoffs, and should they?
In those big games at the top of the National League structure, have those showpiece events. So that's probably why it would probably be a little bit more turbulent if you had playoff systems in lower down the leagues. If you were probably given the opportunity for a team in 4th position to get the opportunity to go up, it probably wouldn't give you a true reflection, and the cream would probably never rise to the top. So that's my opinion on it. I think that's probably why, and I agree with it. I think that in the national leagues lower down, it gives you a chance for the teams to go up and test themselves at the next level. The playoff system is for a crack at the Premiership crown for the best 4 teams in the country, and yeah, you'd probably get quite a kind of turbulent landscape over the grand scheme of things if that was replicated throughout the divisions.
Just for a bit of fun, of course, because it's the last episode. If they did this season, we'd have had the following 4 teams in the playoffs in National 4. So we've got Garnock at the top, Strathmore, Whitecraigs and Stewartry. And the points ranging from 89 points at the top for Garnock down to 56 for Stewartry. 33 points difference, with a chance of Stewartry in 2 one-off matches actually being promoted above a team 33 points above them.
I would hate to go on a night out with you, Stuart, because if that is fun, then I don't know if I'd be able to cope. I get it. There's a stark difference between teams in the national, and I think that probably kind of replicates my point in terms of looking at those leagues and saying that there is a big difference sometimes between the quality that goes up. Sometimes teams get a bit of investment, there's a bit of quality comes through. At the teams at the top of the pyramid, it's a little bit more steady. We've seen Hawick, Marr and Currie fight it out for Premiership trophies over the last 3 years. They've all won one as well, so it's been pretty consistent at the top, and they've all had a chance to win it. They've all won one, some backs to the wall, some have went in as favourites and been able to snatch and grab, and they've all been exciting, but I think further down the leagues it just wouldn't work.
There is middle ground though between us, surprisingly, and I think that's the cup. We both know the cup is kind of broken, but could the cup actually replace the playoffs and become the big thing that you as a kid went to Murrayfield and thoroughly enjoyed? Because I think there's real room for the playoffs effectively becoming the cup, and you still crown the champions.
Yeah, because you're looking for one big showpiece event, and I think we spoke about that last week.
And it's clearly not the cup.
Yeah, and it clearly isn't the cup, and that's why it gives an opportunity to shine on club rugby. And you looked on social media after, loads of players from all over. Scottish. There was, I think I seen one of Kieran Ramsey was watching it abroad. Matt Scott was with Fergus Scott watching the game, and ex-Currie players that served their club well and went on to different things, obviously. But there's a huge appetite for big games in club rugby, and the playoffs at the moment is the big game that we get. Obviously, there's a bit of work to be done for the cup competition, but I'll still stick by my point that I made last week in terms of there's probably a lot more travel needing to be done with the cup before we see that becoming a showpiece event. So in the meantime, I think that's where the playoff final takes its position. And I would hope that you've got the middle ground there, and as well as in the terms of the last 3 playoff finals that we've had, have all had huge talking points, all been really exciting. But I get it that could be a cup final as well. But yeah, we were treated to a classic at Mansfield Park.
Indeed we were. Now, going back to National 3 just briefly, because Hamilton, I noticed, were disqualified for not being able to fulfil what was effectively a dead rubber fixture at Orkney at the end of the season. Now, they did try twice early in the season to travel, and I think on one occasion they did actually set off to go to Orkney, and then the ferry was cancelled, so they had to come all the way back again. Now, bearing in mind this is at the end of the season when it had no bearing at all on the outcome of the league for anyone, they couldn't raise a team. The result was that instead of a points deduction, for instance, and a 28-0 win for Orkney, which probably would have been a sensible outcome, the Championship Committee scrapped all the fixtures they'd played and made them void, so that we had a 9-team league effectively, which again had no bearing on the outcome of the league. And as they were relegated anyway, they'll still be playing in National 4 next season. I just can't help but feeling this was the old sledgehammer and nut routine.
Yeah, I think that's probably what it is. They're almost trying to make them an example, I would say. There was no impact on the divisions at all, or that division certainly. And it's unfortunate, but certainly for the Hamilton guys, because a trip to Orkney is fantastic. So obviously they don't get the opportunity to go away from home and end their season. It's been a disappointing season for them. But I think that any change in decisions obviously will have to go through the channels, and it'll have to be an administration task in terms of overturning that. But it is almost like it's been an opportunity to say, if you can't raise a team, this is the sort of punishment that you'll get. And we don't want to see teams in the future, in the next 5 years, having these fixtures and not being able to fulfil them, because other leagues have perhaps went that way, where it means it dilutes the competition. And our league structure is pretty strong. The clubs buy into the league campaign, and they very seldom forfeit games in the National League anyway. But you think about leagues like the Border League, which has kind of fallen by the wayside because it's a bit of an add-on, and there's really no punishment if Peebles have lost the first 2 games and go, do you know what, we don't actually, so we play Melrose and Hawick and Gala. So I think it's an opportunity to use them as an example, but it does kind of fire a warning shot to the other clubs that are all desperately trying to be successful, raise teams and provide rugby in their communities. So the other outcome is just a bit of a softer approach, which perhaps gives other clubs an opportunity to argue their case if it was ever to happen to them.
But I do get the feeling that, there's this mentality of kick them while they're down, and you often feel a little bit disappointed for those clubs who are clearly trying to get people on the park, and it's not always possible.
Yeah, but I just think it's one of those committee decisions that it really won't have too much of an impact. If anything, there'll be a sour taste in the mouth, and if it might galvanise that club and going, well, do you know what, we'll prove them wrong up at HQ, and we'll get back up the leagues, and we'll get the players back on the pitch. But it might go the other way. It might be like, well, if we're going to be treated like that, then volunteers might go away. But I think there's still there'll be time to see what impact that decision's going to have. But the rules they've obviously followed a process, they've followed the procedures, and if that's what it says, then unfortunately for them, that's the way the decisions went. But I was actually speaking to I can't even remember off the top of my head, we're speaking about games that were still left to fulfil and teams that were going down. And Hamilton were one of the names that came up, and they were shocked to think that a big team like Hamilton is starting to plummet down the leagues. And hopefully it's a reaction. You get a positive reaction at that club and can see them come back up, because we had many good games against Hamilton in my playing days, and they're obviously a really good club which has provided a lot of good players over the years. So unfortunate for them, but it's the decision that's been made.
I think there have been worse decisions though. Do you know the worst decision I think in club rugby history? Bigger not going up, the COVID year. Yeah. Actually presented them with the trophy and took it back again. That's got to be the worst decision ever made.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. However, in hindsight, you think would Bigger be able to sustain that quality at the top? We'll never know, because they weren't given the opportunity. Maybe recruitment would have been a little bit different, but obviously they were able to sustain a kind of promotion push kind of year after, and then have fallen away a little bit. But I think at the time I totally agree with you. It was a silly decision when some of the leagues were all already wrapped up.
Right, OK, let's move on then, because double weekend in Kings of the Sevens. Kelso Sevens was won by Melrose against Kelso in the final. Then Earlston Sevens, Melrose made the final again against the Old Stars, made up of members of the Scotland Sevens team from 7 years ago, who lifted the World Series leg at Twickenham way back then. All in their 30s now, of course, including Roddy Grant, who I think is 37 years old and looked fit as a fiddle on there. But they managed to battle their way throughout the tournament, despite most of them, as they being long retired, and they won the trophy. And of course they'll be invited back as a matter of course for next year. Of course, the big question is, do you think they will come back again?
It would be nice to see them back. You can see they've all had a really good weekend. Mark Robertson has put on his social media about how much he enjoyed it, and some of the other players, Scott White, Lee Jones, that were there, not expecting to be victors at Earlston Sevens as well. So, it was a great addition to the tournament as well. Unfortunate for Melrose, it could have been a really successful weekend for them. it's obviously, it could have been a big success for them, but obviously the Old Stars were as sharp up top, maybe a little bit slower in the body, but at that level they were able to show their class and get over the line. So it was great to see. Hopefully they do come back. They'll be another year older, but obviously they had as you can see, Roddy Grant being one of them, they've kept themselves, they're ex-professional athletes, they've kept themselves in incredible nick. It would definitely be great to see them back again at Earlston Sevens, and probably something that Kings of the Sevens circuit needs, because there's elements of that certainly need addressed.
Big crowd at Earlston. It's good to see, of course, because events like this, that keeps them going for the next season, and they've got a really big season to look forward to in East League 3 with 3 derbies. You've got Gala YM, Duns and Hawick Dean all in that division next year, and yes, it's East League 3, but competitive rugby, that's what you want.
Yeah, you want derbies, you want something that's going to give you a reason to get to the training field and get supporting that club, but in terms of the Kings of the Sevens, the Earlston it's been the anomaly. They're an East League team. Yes, Langham are now as well, but Earlston have been for a long time, and they have had probably one of the most successful Kings of the Sevens tournaments for as long as I can remember. It's always been well supported. It does help the weekend it's on, because obviously they've got the Monday holiday, but yeah, it's a fantastic weekend. It's great to play in as well, because the crowd itself is so tight to the pitch. There's no stand, it's literally spectators littered around the ground. The teams just camped out anywhere they can find a position, sometimes in amongst the crowd watching the rugby. It's really good, because there's not really many places to warm up either. It's obviously it's a really kind of niche tournament, and I really enjoyed playing there. Enjoyed covering it as well. The times I've been there in the past, but there's probably a lot of things that Earlston are perhaps doing right that other clubs aren't. I just think, in the Kings of the Sevens at the moment, there's a little bit of, you come back to the Old Stars being involved. I probably didn't appreciate it as much at the time when you said, will that bring people through the gate? I do think there's a bit of a disconnection between local rugby at the moment and the spectators, but it obviously did. It's brought people, and you see it in the offside line, you see it covered quite well on social media, so obviously it's got good backing, but there is something in the Kings of the Sevens circuit that needs done, a bit of consistency, a bit of, just a little bit more ownership, I think, from the brand, essentially, because other places in Scotland have tried to replicate it and not been able to. Unless something's done in the next 5 years, it could start to be a bit of a border league kind of addition to the calendar as it gets engulfed with 15s, but Earlston again and Kelso, another successful weekend, and I think you of all people will be glad to see the back of the back-to-back weekends.
Yes, I will. Yes, it is a little bit of a toughie, isn't it? There's no doubt about that. Well, look at the table, because of course the big news was that Kelso got knocked out in the first round by Edinburgh University, and being a knockout competition, that was it. No points for them, so they stuck at 47. Melrose on 42 now, so just 5 points behind. They traditionally have a great moving weekend, as you say they call it. It means that they got 10 points at Kelso, and they got 7 points at Earlston, so all of a sudden within 5 of Kelso with 2 tournaments remaining. And Gala did pretty well as well. They were put out by the Old Stars. They end up with 38, so just 4 points behind Melrose, so it's really down to those 3 now. Selkirk, of course, going out to Jedforest, I think it was, in the first round, so they stick on 27, and for them their race is run. And below that, well, Jed 18, Herriot 16, Peebles 15, Watsonians 11, Embrackies 11, and Hawick 7. And Hawick obviously have played very little Sevens rugby for obvious reasons this season. So we move on to Selkirk Sevens on Saturday, and then Jedforest Sevens the week after, and Kelso's lead, as I say, at the top slashed to just 5 points.
Yeah, I think it's obviously a big weekend at Philippoch, where somebody could probably grab the advantage going into the opening week, the final weekend at Jed. But I think it comes down to the draws that are going to be... it's an interesting draw, isn't it, Selkirk, because you've got the 3 top teams all in the bottom half, so something's going to give them. Yeah, which is interesting in itself. Not to sit on the fence, but it's a horrific draw. Like, it is a terrible draw. And I think that's part of it. I was saying about the Kings of the Sevens in terms of having a bit of credibility as a competition now. It's got absolutely no credibility if you don't know where and when the draw's made.
I think this is the point, isn't it? And we've said this long before. I don't think that the talk about draws is as controversial now as it was, say, 3 or 4 years ago, because everyone used to be talking about it. And now it's kind of like accepted, well, a draw's a draw. We don't really care how it's done behind closed doors or whatever. I personally would love to see at the end of the Sevens tournament that you're at, you do the draw at the end, which keeps people there, and it adds that excitement. And it's the transparency, isn't it? Because, I mean, we can't prove that draws are fixed or anything like that. There will always be people people saying, oh, that looks a bit suspicious. And you've been involved in Peebles draws before, and I know, and it's come out of the hat, and you think, oh my God, we should redraw this because it looks as if it's really biased towards Peebles. And it was a genuine draw. But it's the transparency of actually filming it or doing it, and people actually seeing the draw being made either live or whatever.
If you got your home tournament and you got a reasonable first round, you were happy because you knew in front of your home fans you were going to be able to go through. But not being a Peebles player, going to the tournament, I just want to see good rugby. And I think you've got to remember that most of the people that are paying money they're paying money, right? Paying their money to go to the ground, to be entertained, to take in a product. And I do think there's a lack of credibility because you've said there, I've been involved in a draw live on the radio. I did it alongside my dad, and the draw was as favourable for Peebles as it could have been, and it was legitimate. It took loads of time, and I was passionate about it, saying Peebles, realistically, they've won their tournament 3 times, right, in their history. So realistically, their chances of winning are pretty slim. So they do need a leg up, but other teams aren't the same. And when you're putting quality against quality in the opening round, you're completely depreciating your tournament from the start. So yeah, I was involved in a draw, and it was as legitimate it could be, and we got a really, really good draw. Because I wasn't playing for them at the time. I was also club captain at the time and went down with some committee members, and the paper clips were all coloured, and it was a rigged draw. So I was there, I was involved in it, and I was told which ones to pick out live on the radio. So fortunately, for my conscience, it was quite good because we actually drew Jedforest in the first round. So as much as it was rigged, it was pretty badly administrated. But then it happened that we beat Jed, so it was justified. Like, we were a better team than Jed on the day and progressed through. I don't know what needs to be done, but in times of change, over the last 10, 15 years, the way people absorb their entertainment and take it on board is wholesale different as to what it used to be. There's ways and means of doing big launches and big draws and managing it better, because there's an opportunity there. Because if it's left any longer, it'll completely get swept aside. I think you look at football in the region, I don't see it. I do not see football in the region when I'm driving through our region in the south of Scotland, for example. I know it's different elsewhere, and this is rugby radio, but other places are a little bit more heavy on football. We are not. You're driving through, there's no visibility, but there's rugby everywhere. I think that in the south of Scotland, you can almost be in a position that if you're not moving with the times and trying to stay current, you're in danger of also falling into the same trap and being left behind, because the central belt is where everything is. And yeah, there's a chance there that you can almost shoot yourself in the foot because you get complacent about the Kings of the Sevens being what it is. The Kings of the Sevens is a brand, it's iconic. It's loads of teams from certainly Edinburgh and the south of Scotland wanted to play there, and we've seen loads of great players come down as well. But there's a chance for somebody to take a bit of direction from somebody to say, look, we're going to get an independent draw for all the tournaments. It makes it fair, because then everybody has the same chance. They start the season knowing the draw is in the hands of the Border League Committee, or it's in the hands of Border Rugby TV or Rugby Radio, or it's in the hands of the title sponsor. There is something needing to be done there, because if I'm paying 15, 20 quid or 40 quid to go to a Sevens tournament, and I'm having to put up with out of 10 games watching 2 decent ones, I'm not paying my money. I'm going somewhere else, and I'm going to do something else for my weekend, and that's the decision people are making nowadays. So I think there's a lot of work. I think the draw sorts some of it, it doesn't sort all of it. But obviously with the change in the structure next year, quality comes back down to Kings of the Sevens. Is it going to be taken as seriously? But there just needs to be a bit more transparency, because a draw is a draw and a competition's a competition, and with draws like that, it's been undermined. OK, well, we're going to finish today with a chat that I had with Kelso Director of Rugby recently. That's Neil Hinnigan. He's a man who has his pulse very much on the club rugby scene. He's done wonders this season for Kelso, and he has some very interesting views on a number of subjects. The Border League this season, the plus points are the fact that it's a league, everybody's playing each other. We've seen in the past, I remember Gala playing one match, getting to the final, and suddenly you're Border champions. Doesn't work for me, that. So everyone's been trying in the clubs to make this work. There's still a few teething problems, of course, about it, because you've got to fit in matches around cup games, around league matches, and eventually you get to the end of the season and people are struggling. But overall, Border League for this season, what's your own thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the Border League, you've got the I'm not going to go on about it because everybody's heard about the history, and, that's always brought up, and in the cliches and everything. But what we've got to look at, Stu, is that what the players want more is probably important around this stuff, because we now have a situation, for me, where we're struggling again to get these games played. They really want it to be a big thing. Is it a development league? Is it, a championship? How do you... Because Do we make it an under-23s league with a couple of players allowed to play that are over that age, or, you know, a set limit or something like that, where we can start to develop more players? Because that's what we've turned our attention to at Kelso. We've started to play effectively an under-23s team to try and get the benefit of playing in it, because we had effectively 2 dead rubbers to play in the last 2 games, and I don't know how it gets sorted. I know they're making a big effort, and there's the Border League Committee are giving a lot to it, and you've got to appreciate that, but I still don't think we're getting it right. That's my opinion. It's not got the appetite from the players either. They will question me on that. So, you know, it's I've been, but it's not for me got a huge appeal to the players.
We've seen the Scottish Cup this season. We've seen the Scottish League Cup as well. There's been teams pulling out, teams withdrawing. It's lost all credibility. It needs looking at. I think it's easily solved as well. It's all about, you know, the Border League, and so the clubs seem to be focusing on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the clubs are looking at making a bit more money from home games, which is badly needed. I know at Kelso we felt it with the fact we only had 9 home games in the league, so we were down 3 home league games from last season, and then obviously with the Border League, I mean, this seems like a personal gripe, but you know, Kelso's only played 1 extra home fixture in the Border League in 3 seasons, and that was Peebles in pre-season this year because we already had it organised. And I made a bit of a complaint at the time about the fixtures because we didn't have any extra to make any money. So we pulled out the cup where we could have had a juicy home fixture against Marr or whoever, and we would have had a huge crowd. So we've effectively came out the cup to try and get more home games, but that's not really what's happened. We even played the Border League final away from home to Hawick. So it's not really went Kelso's way anyways, the Border League, for the last couple of 2-3 years since COVID, and you know, they've got to get all that sorted as well. I mean, the fixtures are up and down every year. That is vitally important. And there's also the travel. I mean, if you get drawn away to Highland in the Cup, for example, or a Dundee, or, you know, Ayr, whatever, there's a lot of cost to that, Stu, for no return.
Yeah, no prize money, is it?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the biggest issues. Or would you rather play a home game against Selkirk or Jed and maybe turn over £2,000 or £3,000, you know, on a Friday night, or $5,000 on a Saturday? You know, this is the kind of figures we're talking about. So, you know, clubs are really looking at that, and I think the older generation and the people that are in committees are looking at that as a huge positive, and they're right. And then you've got the players' point of view. Some of them were very disappointed not to play in the Cup, others not so much. But when you see the way the Cup's unfolded, you know, it's lost a lot of credit as well. The number of teams that have pulled out of just playing like a quarter-final or a first round, you know, they've pulled out. So there's a fair bit of structure and balance needs put in place across the whole of Scotland, and I do applaud the South teams for looking at trying to get ahead of that, you know, in one way or another. So there's a bit of credit to go out to them for getting together and trying to make that work.
Do you think that's going to be enough momentum after this year to take it past the next couple of years, so we get used to it? Because there's some prize money coming in, isn't there? There's certainly sponsorship coming in, the 5 figures I've heard. So that's going to hopefully make some kind of difference, because the Border League has been without a sponsor for years.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge positive, and again, credit to the people that are trying to make a difference, and that's a big step in the right direction. You know, money makes the world go round, so if you're making it more attractive for clubs, for starters, that usually then filters to the players, because the atmosphere and the importance of it becomes more important. So you could find that it does help, and it certainly help a club that can win some prize money, and the sponsorship's never going to go amiss. So that is one step in the right direction completely. You know, one thing for sure is we've got to try and get behind it one way or another as a region to make it something like it was back in the 80s or the 90s, and that would certainly help, as I've mentioned, generate income at the club. So not only are you getting maybe prize money or sponsorship, you're then getting extra crowds at home that can generate income to keep your club afloat. So there's loads of reasons why it's a good thing, don't get me wrong. I can see huge amount of positives.
Do you think there's room for the Scottish Cup and a Border League in the future if the SRU get together with the clubs and decide that, you know, we really need to fix the Scottish Cup? Because that would then take us back to where the SRU and the clubs would want everyone to be involved in the Cup.
Yeah, I mean, for the SRU, they need to, if they want the cup, if from their point of view, they want the cup to be successful, you need the border clubs in it. I mean, there's 6-7 clubs that are going to play in it, and 2 or 3 of them you'd expect to get to the latter rounds every year. So they really need that from their point of view, and for the whole of Scotland, that would make more sense to me, anyways. So I don't know if you can have one without the other. Would be my answer to the question. I don't think so. Can the border teams play across 3 competitions? Well, I think it's a real struggle because the season's already too long, and everybody keeps saying that. And now the Premiership's been made back to 12 teams. So for me, it's just there's too much. I think they've made the right call just playing the Border League and not the Cup. I think players are probably glad at it at this point.
Border clubs very different to clubs outside the area. A lot of clubs don't have a sevens package at the end of the season. They don't have like their own little leagues like the Border League. So it puts pressure, of course, on the Borders clubs to get all these games played. And of course, the pre-season, a lot of people have different views. But of course, at the moment, we've got 2 pre-season sevens tournaments. There were 3. Hawick went pre-season, didn't work for them. Gala have gone with the pre-season. And of course, that alone presents its own problems because we've seen in the past, in the end, that Gala ended up with 8 teams with clubs pulling out. Some gave plenty of notice, others, unfortunately, a few hours or whatever, which wasn't good enough. But to try and get the Kings of the Sevens played, Peebles love the pre-season because it's the first one, so they're not affected as much as, say, Gala is with their Marooned at Gala tournament. But it's just so difficult, isn't it? Because there's so many different ways you can do it, but only so many weeks in the year.
No, I take that point, and with the Sevens, I understand why Peebles and Gala. I mean, Gala had a really bad weekend originally, and I agree with them that possibly wasn't working, so they moved. But if you're playing the tournaments on the Saturdays, you can play a Border League game on the Friday night at that stage of the season, or
even Wednesday. I mean, it's light enough, and they've all got lights.
Yeah, I don't know about other clubs. Kelso would be quite happy playing the Friday night before Gala or Peebles, and then turning out on the Saturday for Sevens. I mean, you could rest your 4 or 5 best Sevens players if you wanted. That's up to you. And then depends how serious you're taking the Sevens. So, it then gives a bit of choice. We still need to support each other with, you've got to be respectful to Peebles, Gala, and send teams to these Sevens tournaments. I'm a big believer in that. Your own Sevens tournament, you expect teams to turn up. So you might send a second team 7 occasionally, but you'll turn up. And that's what you've got to do. You've got to support each other's Sevens tournaments, because that's the basics of it. No doubt about it. So, the Sevens can't be put aside or anything for 15s for me, if we want to keep that going. But there's no reason in pre-season why you couldn't play a Friday night or a Thursday night before you played Sevens. So, yeah, for me, be creative, play a Sunday, have a family day, start the season. We've got to come up with something to help this work and get the structure right. But the Border League Committee, for example, or the organisers of this, are tied to a certain degree because the SRU will set the structure as such, the overall structure, and that for me is wrong. So they've got to get that right first, and then this cup debate. And for me, that they've got to look at how that is the priority, to get these things in place, and then all the other regions can work around that to suit themselves. But yeah, it's a tough ask, this. I mean, we could probably come back next year at this time and we'll be having the same problems again. Because
we have, as you said earlier, Premiership is going to be 12 teams. Does that mean we don't have a playoffs next season? Have you heard?
All I've heard is that 3 teams go down.
Yeah.
To make it back to the 10. So, but I presume there'll be a top 4 playoff again. I don't know. You'll be delighted if there's not, Stu, of course. But
what makes you say that?
I don't know what gives that idea away. But yeah, I don't know for sure, but I've not heard. But I presume there probably will be. But I know there's 3 teams go down to get back to a 10.
Yeah, that's right. So we're back to the K7s anyway again, and I know my argument has always been, and I've said this to Phil Morris as well, the director, I don't believe that the Melrose Sevens should actually be part of the Kings of the Sevens, and I'll tell you why. Because usually points-wise, you'll get 2, maybe 3 if you're lucky, local sides who will qualify for getting those points. It's a guest team that will get the 10 points, which is no use to them whatsoever. The argument for having the points is that if you're good enough to actually get to the final and get 10 points or 7 points, then you probably deserve to get that points total because you've played your socks off and you're way above the other clubs that are part of the Kings of the Sevens tournament. So I get that. But I think the one thing I'm hoping for, and it's something I mentioned about 10 years ago, and it seems to be, it's on the agenda now to be talked about, and that would be to bring the Saturday Melrose Sevens back to what it used to be, which is all the clubs. Bring back your Langhams and your Berwicks and Earlstons and get everybody involved. A real traditional K7s tournament, which would be well supported because it's all local. You obviously have your Scottish clubs in there as well, but make it more of a club thing. There is an argument, of course. A lot of the local players, they want to play against, these big name guys that come in on guest teams, and they want to do that. But it's only literally if they get through the preliminary round, less of a chance of that happening.
Yeah, I would agree with you to most of what the angle you're coming at, Stu, there, that the guest sides, no one knows them. I mean, they're not household internationals nowadays. Back in the day, David Campese and Serge Blanco and players like that came to play, and that, I totally understand why that was a huge attraction. And a
TV audience as well, of course.
Yeah, and around here you had players, like Andrew Kerr and Eric Paxton and Ronnie Kilpatrick and these kind of guys that were at all these clubs and all the Great White teams. They were able to take these teams on. Just look at my own club for years in the 80s, were early 90s were regularly beating these teams. So for me, it was actually really, really good because you then had the attraction of these teams competing against each other, and it was competitive. Unfortunately now, it's got to the point where, amateur rugby around here is purely amateur, and teams just can't compete, especially over 4 or 5 ties against these other semi-pros or pros in some cases now. For me, there is a difference between the teams, and it's got to a point now where I would disagree that players want to play against them. Some of them will do, obviously, but majority are at the point now where they're fed up of going along. They're out in the first round, they're away, or they beat someone similar in the preliminary, and then they play one of the big guns and they're gone. So I don't think it has the same appeal for the players locally. And you look at some of the teams that have been coming along, there's not all of them looking to return as such. There's not a huge buy-in in return either. I mean, teams like Speranza and that have turned up once and they've never been seen again. So there's loads of different arguments towards what you're saying, and I think overall, there is a problem for Melrose Sevens at the moment. So yeah, I think if you got an amateur tournament, the slogan I would go after is the best amateur tournament
in the world. Yeah.
You've got to go for what we've got. And that is something we've still got hold of, that it is the home of Sevens, it is the original. So you could have that. I would say, if possible, you could still have a couple of guest club teams from somewhere who are that level, who are the same level as a Premiership Scotland team or a National 1 Scotland team. And therefore, it's competitive, and it is, again, luck on the day. If they're good enough, great. If they're not, one of the teams will lead them up from up here, and people love that as well. So you could still do a bit of that, but there's just a huge divide at the moment between some of the teams that are coming to Melrose Sevens, and like Jedforest have been one of the better teams, over the years, and even they struggled to compete to any real forum against any of the big teams. So for me, it's just too much a foregone conclusion for the local sides at the moment.
And I really don't think that the crowd would suddenly disappear if it was all local people, because you've got the fact that it is the Melrose Sevens, the history involved with that. You would still get a big crowd. More local teams, to me, means more people coming through the gate to actually watch it. And of course, as well, we've all been there when a local team, whether it be Melrose, Jedforest, whoever it is, get to the latter stages. There is such a buzz. And we also know on the flip side of that, when it's 4 guest teams that no one's really heard of into the semi-finals, it goes flat. Let's be honest.
Yeah, that's right. It doesn't. It's, as I say, it's an issue, and if for me to make it better, it would be, if you had an in-forum Melrose team playing against an in-forum Jed team, and then say, one of the city teams or say a Highland team came down and they were playing Hawick and the others, you could imagine the atmosphere at the semi-final stage would be red hot. So for me, that I would say that would be something to try and aim for, definitely. But again, if you had an unknown club side, say somebody from one of the Welsh regions that are Welsh Premiership or below, or below that, I think they'd be a bit strong, but coming up and playing, and they're the unknown, and it's the good guys beat the bad guys like it used to be.
Yeah.
You pick up that atmosphere. It's about getting that balance of competitiveness. I don't think the guest teams are such a problem. It's just the regulation of they can pick from anywhere, from absolutely anywhere. But yet, for example, Gala couldn't turn up with 10 players from anywhere. They just picked them up if they wanted to. That's not what you do. So you're at a huge disadvantage every time you're playing any of these teams.
Now, the interesting thing is, of course, you're team manager for Shogun. You just slagged off the thing, and now you're actually representing them. So,
sorry, I want to butt in there because you've nailed me to the masters, Stu. But yeah, what I would say on that is that I've got an honest opinion. Now, it doesn't matter, Shogun, Samurai. It doesn't matter who I'm with. If I believe it's right or wrong, I'll say it. And for me, there's a gulf. Look at the Monaco team last year, the British Army. These teams, they're miles ahead of the club teams, and they have to be. I mean, you're selecting from all of Europe, pretty much. Of course, we're going to struggle. So I'm being honest. There's no point me sitting here saying, I'm going to mastermind the coaches and myself, and mastermind these players through Melrose Sevens, because they've been beaten the final the last 2 years and maybe been unlucky, but the teams that beat us deserved it, and then they were there because we were a higher standard of team. These players had international experience on the circuit, on the World Series. If you've got World Series experience against Kings of Sevens experience, it's professional against amateur.
Yes, and of course, whatever people think about the Melrose Sevens, everyone has their own opinion, and that's absolutely fair enough. We can't get away from the fact that here in the Borders we have the world's most famous tournament, and that has to be protected.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's easy to kick Melrose when they're down. I've spoke about this in here before, and I've got a lot of respect for Melrose because the players they brought through pre-COVID and where they were, and the amount of, you look at coaches as well. You've got John Dale's obviously well on the coach. Scotland, Rob Christie's in the Edinburgh set-up. Scott White's doing well. So you've got to look at what they bring as a club, and their Sevens has been pivotal to that. But for everyone else around the Borders who may be jealous, of it, and that's a natural thing. There's been a lot of good times shared. I've had a lot of joy out of Melrose Sevens, some great memories, and an opportunity to play in Melrose is still a big thing, and I hope that it can regenerate itself a bit more, because it's not down and out by any means. It's still going okay, but hopefully it gets a bit of a boost in the next 2 or 3 years, and it can find its balance as well, and we can all continue to get behind it, because it's a massive event in the world calendar. It is worldwide. It's a worldwide name. So, and you look at the stars that have played it over the years, and I mean, I used to love as a youngster going to Melrose Sevens. I really did. It was always looked forward to it. Nowadays it's more a hassle, but again, it's if you're standing there being part of something, and for me personally, being a team manager of Samurai the last 2 years, and we'd be beating the final, for anyone that's involved, I mean, it's going to be a big memory if you can do it. And I know players cherish those medals. If you speak to guys like Andrew Skeen, who's fortunate to have won two medals, playing in the club game, you really struggle to do that. I've always admired the likes of Adam Roxburgh, has every winner's medal apart from Melrose, A travesty for somebody like him, who was a great sevens player, but never won at Melrose.
It's been a real pleasure, as always, to chew the fat with the great Neil Hinnigan, talking K7s, talking about league structure, border league, and lots of things besides. And it's never a dull moment, that's for sure. Thanks so much for coming in.
No problem, Stuart. Thank you.
Neil Hinnigan with a lot of food for thought there. Right, well, it's the end of the programme, so how about you looking back on the season as a whole and your good points and your bad points?
I think it's been an interesting season. Thoroughly enjoyed it. First and foremost, I think the work that you've done is tremendous. Covering club rugby in a big year of change as well. What you provide for the clubs is tremendous, Stuart. But I think some of the high point. I think the Premiership final was really good, really entertaining. For me, Peebles getting promoted as well. I thought the National Cup final was interesting, mainly just for talking points for the likes of the headbutt and stuff like that. But yeah, it's been an interesting league, and especially being able to cover down in the lower divisions as well this season with the likes of Garnick, their success, and watching Orkney. I think watching Orkney and their story, running PL so close in National 3 was a really interesting point. But obviously some sour points with obviously the sad news at Ross High that we've obviously they've not had a successful season on the pitch either. That's definitely the probably the kind of lasting low point of the season. But there's been a lot of positives, and I think obviously big changes coming on next year as well in club rugby, and it's going to be interesting to be back and covering it and seeing how that's going to unfold.
What do you think is going to happen?
I had a conversation with somebody today and saying 200 players are going to go back into the club scene, and I had to quickly correct them that there's not a chance there's going to be 200 players coming back in. There's going to be a very quick acceleration of the teams at the top trying to jostle for position in terms of Ayr will be strong. I think Heriots will be strong. I think Melrose will take a bit of time to settle, but they will look to grow again. Hawick are going to find it difficult, I think, in this new structure, and so are Currie. But it depends where these players go. So, obviously you're talking about Watsonians who are having to then fight with Heriots and Currie and more teams in the Central Belt for the same players. So I do think the teams like the Ayr, probably Heriots, are in a good spot as well. They might be the two teams that look to push on next year, and the rest will be, looking at it's all based on recruitment, I think, and we'll see. But hopefully we get a little bit of continuity and it settles over the next few years, and it'll be interesting to see what the gap that is left now, how that is plugged. And as well, one thing I think is it'll be really interesting to see what coverage the club game gets. I've said at the start there, the terrific job you do, Stuart, but there was a lot of backing on the Super Series, and if you're then bringing that level up a bit, you're bringing the club game and trying to elevate it and bring the semi-pro down, there has to be a highlight on the club game again, because that's where your players and your stars of the future are coming from. So yeah, I think it's a lot of change, a lot of interesting things, but certainly for me, I think from the whisperings I hear, I think Ayr are going to be pretty strong next year.
Yes, I've heard the whisperings as well.
I don't think they're whisperings, they're pretty loud. I think they're almost shouts, but yeah, good to see them back up in the Premiership again though.
Yeah, I must admit, we did have a couple of games at Millbrae this season. We were royally looked after, and it's a great club, one of many. I
would say on the whole, I think the 50 clubs that we cover, some more than most obviously, but the rugby clubs are the best clubs in Scotland and the UK probably to join if you're a youngster. And obviously the growth of women's rugby now as well, there's something for everybody. There's vets rugby, there's junior rugby, there's adult rugby, so there's loads of lessons. Probably you'll learn more lessons in a rugby club than you will in an educational establishment. So they're great places to be, and all rugby clubs are, certainly the 50 that we cover, they're all really good places. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see next year who's the movers and shakers going into what will be another interesting year with all the kind of narratives that are coming with it.
Yeah, 12-team league at the Premiership, of course, 3 going down, as I understand it, and then we'll end up with 50. So there's going to be a lot of upheaval once again. Do you think there will be playoffs next season, because there's 12 in there?
I've not heard otherwise. I don't see why they would deviate from that. And if they do, it comes back to my point about having a showcase on club rugby and what coverage is going to be done for it. So I think there's a lot of things still to be ironed out in terms of what that league is, how it's going to be presented, portrayed to the public, to people, the audience, to grab onto it and be invested in it. So yeah, I would. For me, I think you know my answer, Stuart. I would like to see the playoffs again next year. So and the quality that we could potentially have in a playoff final? Did they have it at a neutral venue, for example, because it's an elevated game? Did they have it at the Hive Stadium, for example, or do they go with a home advantage? It'll be loads of interesting things, but questions, unfortunately, as a little rotund electrician, I cannot answer.
You call yourself an electrician?
Yeah, well, I used to be.
But that's all happening in June. I think around about June time we will know, and there's a lot of discussion going on. I've been party to some of it, and it's all quite interesting stuff. So we'll look forward to see what happens then. But that's the way we bring the curtain down on this season's Scottish Club Rugby podcast. Hopefully we'll be back next season, most probably in August, talking about all matters relating to the club scene across Scotland. And next season will be particularly interesting, as I say, with the Super Series teams being dissolved into the Premiership and the National 1 divisions. But for now, from me and Dale, thanks for listening, and bye for now.